Good morning.
Good morning.
And I'm sitting with Joe Drago in his living room. Thank you so much, Joe, for accepting our invitation and for taking the time to meet with us.
It's a pleasure.
So we're going to start with the first question, and we're going to ask you to speak of yourself, your passion, your credo, your principles.
Well, I guess I can start from my birthplace. I was born in Creighton Mine, if you can believe that, because nobody even knows where Creighton Mine is at this time. And my father was a projectionist. He ran a movie theater there. My uncle was a barber, and we lived in a duplex with my uncle's family and our family. And we stayed in Creighton till I was in grade 8, I think it was, and then we moved to Sudbury because my dad got a job at the Capitol Theater in downtown Sudbury. And he was a projectionist for 41 years. So from there I started at St. Charles College, and I was in the first class at St. Charles College. It was an all-boys school with nothing but Basilian fathers for teachers. And when I got to the end of grade 12, our principal, Father Lococo was his name, called 3 or 4 of the boys in and said, "Are you fellas prepared to take grade 13 next year?" At the time we had grade 13. We all said, "Yes, Father." He said, "Well, I don't think you're smart enough to do grade 13. So he said, "I'm limiting you to one sport."
Oh boy.
So we were playing, I was on the hockey team, I was captain of the football team, and I loved both sports. So I went home really upset and told my mother. My mother said, you're not going to school to play sports, you're going to school to get an education, you have to go to St. Charles. I said, "Ma, I'm not going to St. Charles. I want to play the 2 sports, and at Sudbury High, I can play the 2 sports." So myself and 2 of the other guys that got the same message that I did, we all went to Sudbury High. And I'm proud to say we won the hockey championship and the football championship.
Well, congratulations.
Anyway, that was abandoning the Catholic education. And then from there, I got a hockey scholarship to New York. And I had a full ride for 4 years at Clarkson University, thanks to Bob Bradley, who was my high school coach and became the principal. Mac Jack, he was the first principal, but never did get to be the principal because he was promoted to superintendent. And he told me that he wanted me to stay in education for a while, and then I could change my mind later on. But to get a feel of education, because he said, you probably would enjoy working with youngsters. So Mr. Bradley, I called him Mr. Bradley till the day he died, even though he was my friend, my boss. And I did a eulogy at his funeral, and we became very close. I decided I'll try a year of teaching. So I was teaching math and accounting. And I truly didn't enjoy classroom. So I said close to the end of the year, I went in to see him, and he said, what are your plans? I said, my plans are that I'm not going to be a teacher. And he said, why? I said, I really don't like the classroom, that every 35 minutes the bell rings and everybody runs out of the room and runs down the hall to the next room, and that's not my style. So he said, well, what do I have to do to keep you here? I said, get me out of the classroom. So he said, well, how would you like to be in guidance? I said, full-time? Yes. So he gave me a timetable, full-time, in the guidance department. And that's where I really felt so good doing that, and I decided I'd stay. I became the head of guidance right after that, and then I moved to LaSalle. I was the head of guidance at LaSalle for 1 year, and at that time, Chelmsford High School was looking for a vice principal. And again, Mr. Bradley called me, said, I want you to apply for that job. Again, I said, I don't think I have enough experience. He said, I want you to apply for that job. My wife, when I came home for dinner, I said to her, I really feel uncomfortable about this. She said, if he told you this, apply. What have you got to lose? So I applied, and lo and behold, I got the job. So I started at Chelmsford. We were bilingual. We were on shift. morning and afternoon
Yes.
shift, French and English.
Yes.
And then the board decided they were going to build another school. One would be a French high school, one would be an English high school. So the big controversy was who's going to have the new building and who's going to have the old building.
Oh, wow.
And so George Menard was the principal, my principal of Chelmsford, and he wanted the new building. And I really was going to be the principal of the Chelmsford High School, but I really didn't care. I thought Chelmsford High School, the building was sensational. It was the old type of building, terrazzo floors, big shops, big classrooms, everything was perfect. So we agreed, you go to Rayside in Azilda and we'll stay in Chelmsford, and that's how it happened. Well, you know, I was very high on the morale and the way that school operated. And it was just really the beginning of so-called super boards. So that school was built by the Rayside-Balfour. I guess it wasn't even Rayside-Balfour at the time. It was just Balfour, I think it was. And then they joined with Azilda, and they became Rayside-Balfour, if I can remember correctly.
That's right, but I forgot about that, right? The school boards were local.
Yeah.
Very local
and
at that time.
That was a wonderful thing, too, because they had their own funding, and we got treated so royally because it was their school, their town.
Proud of it.
Proud. And everybody was proud to be on the staff. So we were treated like kings. And if you needed something, you went to the principal. Your business office was right in the school. He was the business administrator for the board. Only had one high school, so he was right in one of the end offices in the building. So if you needed something, you walked down to his office and knocked at the door and go in and sit down and have a coffee and talk to him, and you usually came out with what you needed. So when the super board came in, you got all these highfalutin superintendents and this guy and that guy who wanted to let you know they're the boss and not you. So
Yeah.
I didn't like that at all. I always felt a school has a complexion.
And part of the community.
That's right. And you have to have people that fit into that community. You just don't have somebody downtown on Drinkwater Street at the time in the school board office saying, "This is your new math teacher." Well, I would like to interview those people ahead of time and say, "Oh yeah, she's or he would be great on our staff," or "That's not a person that would fit in Chelmsford."
Now, if I move on,
Go ahead.
And we say, we talk about lifelong learning. We know what led you, the path that led you to teaching through sharing your experiences. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, I think the one thing that was a big plus for me was getting into the hockey world. I had a 4-year honors degree in business, but I learned more in hockey and in business because I was fortunate to make some good contacts, got into a couple of businesses because of contacts, and I learned what business is all about. And that was one thing I remember calling the guidance head in, and we had a long talk. I said, "You know the big problem with guidance? And I'm guilty as you are. We went to university and now we're telling kids everything they should know about this, this, and this, and this, and they don't know anything because we never experienced any of that." So I think guidance should be hiring people who have some worldly experiences and can pass it on. It's like a priest talking about marriage and he's never been married. So, you know.
That's true.
It's so I thought I'm very fortunate that people call you and say, "I'm going to go into this little business. Would you like to put some money into it, or would you like to be a part of it?" Because you have a connection. And I learned to use connections. They've been very good to me all the time. I don't hesitate. Now I'm doing a lot of charity work. I don't hesitate to go to a business or to go anywhere and say, "I need some help with this organization or this project or this event. How about giving a little bit of cash?" And you know, I always credit myself that I've never been shut out like a goaltender. I always get something. I don't always get what I think I want, but I always get something.
Yeah.
And that's something very often turns out that there's going to be another something down the road, because the person that helped you realizes that you're there for the right reason, and you're not absconding funds, and you're not doing this or doing that. You're doing it to help people, and they all come through. So it's been very rewarding that way.
So you spoke a little bit about your rewards doing this. Could you, maybe there's other rewards as well, and maybe everybody in a journey has struggles.
Yes.
So maybe a little bit about that?
Well, again, I will relate to something in hockey, I guess. I was asked to go to a Junior A Northern Ontario League meeting to give them some guidance, because at the time I was a member of the OHF, Ontario Hockey Federation. So I attended a meeting, and the president was a doctor, a chiropractor. And he approached me after the meeting and said, "Why aren't you sitting on one of these committees?" I said, "Well, I don't belong to anybody. I belong to a league that isn't sanctioned by the branch." And he said, "Well, you can run." I said, "No, if you look at the Constitution, I'm not eligible to run for that." So he had the Constitution altered so that people like me could run for positions. So I ran for the junior council chair for the province, and I was elected. I spent 2 years doing that. The main reason I wanted to do that was Northern Ontario was always treated like a second-rate citizen. The South, "Oh, we don't want to go to the Sioux. That's so far. We don't want to go to Timmins. It's so far." And so we never hosted events, and we never got involved in things in decision-making. So I felt if I could get on that board, you can flap your tongue a bit and maybe get some action. So I ran for the OHF Board of Directors, and I became the second vice chair. The next year I was the first vice chair, and the next year I spent 7 years as the chair of Ontario. Again, this doctor asked me to run. He was now the president of Hockey Canada. He said, "You should run for Hockey Canada." So I ran for Hockey Canada. It was very, very stressful, because you had to have every province vote for you. It was an election. So you literally campaigned on the phone, campaigned through email, and if you had enough money, you could hop on a plane or a bus and go to a province and attend one of their meetings and promote yourself. So I did that, and I got elected to the board. From there, I ran for the executive vice chair the following year, and then I ran for the chair of Hockey Canada, and I was elected. You were only allowed 2 terms, and I served the 2 terms. So in total, I spent 20 years at the Hockey Canada table.
Success all the way.
Yeah, I was very lucky.
Very, very nice. But for people that will be watching your interview, retirement is just a word. And you're involved. You're very involved in the community. Could you speak to that?
Yeah. Well, you know, when I retired, so-called retired from Hockey Canada, and I had retired from the school board prior to that, I was sitting in this room and saying to myself, "What are you doing? You're falling asleep at your laptop. You're watching TV and you don't even see the movie or the story because you're falling asleep. You get up and go to bed at 12:30, 1:30, and you're up tossing and turning at 4 o'clock in the morning. So you get up and dress, but you have nowhere to go." So I said, what am I going to do? Like, I don't want to become useless. So I was invited to the inner city home. They were having a seminar on the weekend looking at restructuring their board. And I had led Hockey Canada through a restructuring of their board, where they had 2 representatives from every province in the country, plus other committee members, and we cut it down to 8 people. So that I saw the inner city home was full of people sitting on a board. So we have 44 food banks in Sudbury, if you can believe that. 44. So there's a lot of money that has to be raised. So we started to go here and there. We have agreements for help from Metro, Costco, Food Basics, and Giant Tiger. And Chris's Independent Grocers. So if you go in the store, you'll see bags at the front. People buy a bag, and then once a week those bags are all delivered to the food bank, and we get that. We do all kinds of special events. I just signed up to do 2 hockey games with the Wolves and 2 basketball games with the Five. We just finished a contract with the Wolves for 50-50. We had a 3-year contract with them, and now they're going to do it themselves. In 3 years, on 50-50, we had sellers from the Legion. We had all kinds of volunteers that came in and sold at the games. We cleared, in 3 years, $465,000 on 50-50. So that's a big hole that we have to fill now. National Grocers has given us a deal that for every $1 we can bring to them to buy food, they will give us $3 of food.
Wow.
So if you give us a can of soup, we get a can of soup. But if you give us $1, we can buy $1 worth of food. So
wow.
I had a fellow yesterday that I went to high school with at St. Charles. He gave me $5,000, so that's like $15,000 of purchasing power.
Yes.
So I spoke at St. Patrick's Church on Saturday, and their Sunday Mass as well, and they're going to have food drives. The churches have been sensational. We even brought the United Church and the Catholic Church working together. And our Knights of Columbus, I'm in the, not Holy Redeemer, St. Andrew the Apostle Council. We're going to be cooking a breakfast for St. Stanislaus on the Hill United Church. So we're even doing our thing to promote unity in religion. But
it's so many outreach at the same time.
Yeah.
And what great success.
Yeah, it's been.
It's very impressive. What advice would you give to the younger generation?
My main advice is get the heck off of your computer, get the heck off of your phone, and try to be involved in the community and in your life.
Throughout your journey, what would you do different?
Nothing.
Good. Well, that is, so you would do everything the same, and I've heard that before from others that I've interviewed. And what do you cherish the most?
I think the day I met my wife.
Oh.
I came home, I was playing hockey, and we had a weekend off, and a very good friend of mine was being married. So I flew home to go to his wedding. His wife-to-be had a cousin who was the girl I ended up marrying, coming to the wedding, but she was going to be alone, so she called me and said, would you consider a blind date for the wedding? So I did, and we ended up from that. She moved to the American border so she could be closer to where I was, and she taught there for a year, and then we got engaged and got married. And the rest is, I think I've told you the rest.
Thank you again for meeting with us. We really appreciate
your
time.
It's been a pleasure. You gave me lots of time to reminisce.
All good.